Welcome to members of the committee. Welcome to other councillors. It's always good to see other people here. I declare the meeting open. A reminder that we are live streaming and the normal courtesies and protocols regarding a meeting of this nature. So with that, I will just note that we have no apologies. We have no change to confirmation of order of business. Are there any updates to the interest register or conflicts with any particular item on this agenda? Thank you. We have no notification of a public forum, so we have nobody there for that. So we'll move to the confirmation of the minutes of the 21st of May. Are there any changes or amendments to those minutes? If there are none, would somebody move that they represent a true record of the meeting? Thank you, Mr. Murray. Seconded by Mr. Dahlberg. Any further discussion on that? If not, all those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Chairperson's report. Just two things really I wanted to say was that one of the things we have in front of us is the interim audit letter for the year ending 30th of June. So as we approach the year end, and although this is not the final report from this, I just note that it's gratifying to see there's no significant issues raised in that interim report. There's some work still to do on some of the outstanding matters, but I think it's a good result to move forward into. It's a good report to move forward into the final audit with. So it's always good to just see that there is some confidence in the fundamentals around the financial stewardship. The second point I want to make is that in the next week or two, you, as members of this committee and other councillors, will receive a copy of the survey about Audit, Risk and Finance Subcommittee. For those in their second term, you'll recall that this is something that was done before the end of the last term, and it's a document, it's a survey designed to inform the Chief Executive and the incoming Council of matters that may be improved as for Audit, Risk and Finance's function in the future to help it keep things moving forward and to carry forward any items that are not completed by this committee in that term. So when you get that survey, can I ask that you please complete it promptly by the deadline so that it can come back for reporting probably to the final meeting of this committee in this term. I have nothing further to say, so with that I move that my report be received. Thank you, Madam Mayor. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We move to the interim audit letter, and I presume I'd hand to you at this stage.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to raise a couple of small matters in relation to my report. One was obviously, as the chair mentioned, there were absolutely no items raised this time, even minor or significant, and that's probably the first audit I have where there's been nothing raised in terms of in the interim audit letter. I also want to confirm that we have gone through the process of terminating the audits for 3 entities for this year end, and that all those matters have gone through council. So that's the Regional Sewerage Business Unit, the Landfill Business Unit and the Civil Defence. So thank you for getting those through the process. And then I just also want to talk about the procurement audit. So Audit New Zealand have got a real focus on procurement over the next couple of years in their work program. And so they've been in recently doing a bit of an audit on our procurement. I've covered that in 3.4. But I just wanted to make it clear that they're sort of going right around the whole country doing this, and then we'll get back through our final audit, we'll get the feedback on that. So I'm really interested to sort of see whether or not we've got some of that procurement right size for our organisation. But happy to take any other questions.
Thank you. Questions, Ms. Harrison? Mr. Murray?
Thank you, Mr. Peters, Ms. Harrison. Perhaps not a question, but more a comment, and I'll just draw your attention to page, I think it's 18 of the agenda. One of the key matters I sort of look for in these reports is some sort of assessment of how we're going, and you'll see there's a heading in the middle called Assessment of Your Control Environment, where the auditors have come in and had a look at our control environment, which from my old days in this area looked at our systems of internal control and then what sort of processes management had across the top of those, and also governance. And you'll see in this section that Audit New Zealand have done some work in there. We've performed high level of assessment of control environment risk management process and monitoring of controls of relevant financial and service performance reporting, and on it goes. Unfortunately, he doesn't actually say how he assesses it at the end of the day. Is it good? Is it very good? Is it excellent? Or is it bad? Or is it medium in terms of the scale? Now, I'm sure implicit in here, because there's no overall recommendations that says, oh, jeepers, you are failing in this area in your management control environment, he would have listed that and given us a recommendation. So implicitly, I think it's saying that we've got good controls, but I just wouldn't mind a bit more of a positive statement that says, yep, you're tracking nicely, thanks, as opposed to trying to read between the lines, which is always, of course, dangerous. So perhaps a little bit of feedback, that a little bit more explicitity, is that the word? Explicit comment on that in here for us would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Murray.
Through the Chair, I'll make sure that Audit New Zealand take that feedback and pull it through into the final audit report.
Thank you. Other questions for Ms. Harrison? Councillor Barker?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if Audit New Zealand examined our procurement procedures that were part of the construction of the infrastructure, being the Stoke Community Centre, and if they were happy with the way that was handled. Do you know, did you receive any comment on that at all?
Through the Chair, I haven't received any comment at all, and I'm not aware of whether they were looking at specific projects. I don't know if that was what was covered.
And the other thing is that it came up at, I think, the council meeting last week, was procurement policies shared policies with our neighbours. Did they look at the possibilities for economic gains by having a shared procurement policy? When this council supported amalgamation with our neighbours, the community didn't support it, but one of the things that arose from the whole process was that we were going to attempt to have shared services. And the first that we're going to do was try and have shared procurement policies, in particular at the libraries, and I've been disappointed that actually none of that has happened.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. I mean, my comment on that is I think we all have an interest in ensuring that the lessons learned in our procurement are applied. I would not necessarily see it as Audit New Zealand's role, or any auditor's role, to suggest a different way of working and collaborating, that no matter how efficient and effective they may be or desirable. I think that would be up to Council to pursue. I would expect them to make sure that the processes that we do are appropriate to take forward into such an arrangement, but probably go no further than that. Thank you. I had Councillor Matheson and I think Councillor Dahlberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I just, in this report on page 19, they mentioned just a note that debt management is one issue that they reviewed. Can I just, on that particular point, raise the issue that's becoming a little concern for me, and that is the perceived disestablishment of a charitable organisation from the Brook, who have said that because they are now have incurred a debt via the court system, that they may disestablish themselves to avoid paying the debt, and that debt is owed to NCC and DOC and so forth. I find that really disturbing, that an organisation can incur that debt deliberately, knowing at the end of the day that we're not in a position to pay any costs should they be awarded. I presume that this council, for reputational reasons, firstly, will pursue that recovery of that debt and make it very clear to the organisation concerned that we won't buckle down or ignore such a situation that has arisen from that conversation they made public. I would be really disturbed because in the past we have, for some reasons or whatever reason, walked away from one or two. And I think we get to the point that we're here to manage and govern the city's finances in a mature and responsible way. So I'd like that noted that that is our role and our responsibility.
Thank you, Councillor Matheson. Ms Harrison, did you want to comment on that in any way? My expectation would be that that debt would be handled and pursued in the normal manner.
Through the chair, absolutely. I mean, if we want to have any discussion on this, it would be as part of the public excluded agenda, and we can give you an update on that.
Thank you. Councillor Dahlberg.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm just following up again with Mr. Murray's comment there again. I thought that assessment of our control environment, where it followed up and said it may not include all weaknesses for internal controls, was a wee bit lacking really in substance. I'm pleased we're following that up. And also, as we get to the end of our 3 years, one of the other things that Mr. Barker mentioned there, Councillor Barker mentioned, was following up on debt. And I remember when we first came in, one of the comments we made was the previous Theatre Royal and the debt to one of the ticketing guys, the record bar, all being it was in that previous 3 years before we came in. And sometimes we just fail to actually either get onto it quick enough or to follow stuff up. And that is a debt that's below to the council, and I think we should make a statement there that that's what we're here to do. Because otherwise we appear to become an easy target for either getting funding or thinking because they've got a challenge that they can, we will, with the grace of not wishing to be seen to be too aggressive, forgive debt. And I think that's part of our, shall I say, corporate. We've decided we're going to improve on our governance issues. And I think that's one of the ones we can do, because that is a challenge for us. The cross-subsidising of one section of the community to another. And I think we need to be even-handed and fair about that.
Thank you, Councillor Dahlberg. Just to respond to that, if I may, before coming to you, Madam Mayor. Regarding your first point, I think the disclaimer in there about may not include all weaknesses and so on is a standard clause that I don't think I've ever seen an audit report without. It is a nature of the way audits are conducted to have such a thing. I think the assurance is that, the comfort is that if they found anything, then it certainly would be there.
I was with that, Mr. Chair, but I was thinking, with really not even giving us one way or the how we went, and then to put a catch-all clause on it, it's kind of like, I was thinking, did they actually do any work on it? That's what I was really hitting to.
This is an interim report, and I think we need to keep that in mind. With the other one, I totally endorse your view about debt, pursuit of bad debt, and would comment that overall for an organisation of this size, historically the debt collection, the debt write-off levels have been remarkably low for an organisation of this size and complexity. So I think that is not only a sign that there has been due diligence applied, but that it needs to continue. Thank you. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've just got some questions around the item that's in front of us, which is the audit letter, but I just would perhaps make a couple of comments that matters that have been raised by both Deputy Mayor and Councillor Dahlberg, both of them are matters that would be dealt with in public excluded. So, and I think some of the comments that have been made in public actually don't reflect the actuality of situations. So I just would say, with regard to what I can say in public, with regard to the Everyman Records matter, that was pursued very thoroughly by the council, very thoroughly indeed, and went to Audit New Zealand, and there are matters in relation to that that can't be discussed in public, but I don't think there is any issue at all about a lack of persistence on behalf of the ratepayers of Nelson to address that issue. Similarly, the matters related to court proceedings are dealt with in public excluded, and I don't see any lack of action and activity by the officers in relation to those matters. It's very thoroughly managed through, and we've just been strengthening our legal team, and I think that's a good thing to have in-house legal counsel and giving supplementary support when they need to. In relation to the shared services matters between councils, there's actually been quite a lot of progress in relation to shared services, and I note the regional land transport, the regional landfill that Ms Harrison mentioned before, and the internal audit process there. The same for the regional sewage business unit. We've just seen the land development manual, the first joint one come through for the two councils, and there are ongoing discussions at a high level at the moment in relation to water infrastructure, and I expect that to continue post-election. It's not the time of year to be starting to look at those really big picture issues, but everything is heading in a very positive way, and I have to say that in terms of the recent drought situation, Nelson City did an excellent job of working alongside Tasman District Council to address those issues, as it does in civil defence. But in relation to the matter that we were meant to be addressing, I think, which is the interim audit letter, I've just got a couple of questions in relation to page 22, and I just wonder if Ms Harrison could perhaps talk us through the item that is called lack of system restriction controls to prevent any unauthorised data editing for call-out time measures, and it indicates that one is currently investigating different options. Nikki, can you just talk us through what that's about?
So through the chair, I think Mr Levitas knows a bit more detail. I think it is that basically with when one of our major contractors gets called out, when Audit New Zealand came in, they could see that you could actually edit the time or something like that. There wasn't the control around the call-out times, and they weren't happy with that level of data. So I know they're still trying to work on a solution, and I'm really keen that we get these items off the list. So I will pursue that.
All right, thank you. So that is, because I just noticed it's the only thing in the audit letter. I did notice that they were saying we've got some that are long outstanding. That's not so bad, but in terms of time frame. But just coming to the just question, just for my own clarity, the next one down, which relates to the parking revenue contract. Who holds that contract? Is that presumably that is held separately to Environmental Inspections Limited, or is it held by them?
Through the chair, it's a separate contract with Armaguard, is my understanding, okay, for the collection. And I've got a bit more detail on this because we have been working through these contracts as they've been coming up for renewal, and we've worked. So the golf club one has come up since this has been raised, and we're getting transaction listings for that. The Ticket Direct one, Marina. There are some that are quite difficult, like the parking revenue one, and I think that really is going to require new parking machines. You know, I'd really like to get to a point where we're not having cash for parking machines, if we can, from a security perspective. And the CLM contract, Sport Tasman, those sort of things. So we're working through them progressively. The ones that are still tricky are the transfer station and the parking revenue from my perspective.
Well, thank you for that update, thank you. And then the last one I think is on page 23, and that is under project management, and there's a comment in progress. The City Council reviewed the draft project management policy and has agreed not to progress further for the time being. Can we just have the background on that one? I think that must be an internal document, is it? The project management policy?
Through the chair. So the way this reports written, I think they kind of got a status update when they were here, and then over on the right-hand side, I've said that we have approved a high-level project management policy on the 27th of May, so that's the update to that comment.
Right. So what's the breadth of that policy, Nikki?
It's really, I could ask Arlene to speak to the policy, but it is a very high-level policy around how we manage projects, definitions of a project, how we manage them, how we right-size them, and Arlene's been working through some tools to roll out to project managers, but it's, yeah.
All right, so and within that policy, does it set out the other element, which is the post-implementation reviews at completion of projects? Does it set out the procedures around review?
Thank you.
Through the Chair, the project management policy covers the minimum requirements of our staff in terms of their project management controls and what must happen. We have some further work to do in the next financial year, as indicated in the audit report, regarding benefits review and post-implementation. The policy touches in, it's a light touch on post-implementation, but it does make a requirement. And in the templates that we are rolling out alongside that policy, there is provision for reporting back on post-implementation review around the project controls and achievement of the project, and then a further review on achievement of benefits that we were intending to secure through that project.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chair. Arlene, well, in terms of what comes out of those reviews, will they be reported back at a governance level, or are they purely at a management level?
Through the Chair, that's a process that we still need to work through with our internal management teams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Ackland, just before you go, a question that's generated for me in terms of that policy. Can you just give me a quick idea of what, to what extent the new policy covers and includes risk assessment, risk inclusions, risk awareness, risk profiles of project at whatever level they're at?
Through the Chair, the policy makes it a minimum requirement of any project to be managed that risks and issues must be managed, and there's provision for those in the tools and templates.
Thank you. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm not a member of this committee, but this particular item is of interest to me in relation to the Green Meadows project, I guess, because is this policy at the management level going to review the Green Meadows? Is it going to be in play early enough to do a review of the Green Meadows? Maybe find some learnings from that.
Through the Chair, no. I mean, this is, I think there'll be a separate report on the Green Meadows that will be separate from this.
So I guess when will this policy start? When will it be implemented?
Through the Chair, my understanding is it's the 1st of July.
Okay, so it's in time for any future major projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noonan. Councillor McGurk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your knowledge. Just one question really in relation to, on page 22, the open recommendations, evaluation of infrastructure assets. I'm just wondering it doesn't really tell me what the recommendations are and where we are with it, what's in, what's out. Particular is that we've probably got a couple of assets that are outside our usual valuation. I wonder if they've been included.
Through the Chair, so the valuation of infrastructure assets we've been working on with Audit New Zealand over the last couple of years, and a lot of their recommendations and questions were around, so we do a full revaluation every second year, and then an indexing exercise in the interim year where we use a valuer to provide us some indices of how infrastructure assets have moved in the in the previous year. I mean, all their recommendations have been implemented, and some of it is around moving the valuation earlier so that we don't kind of get that year-end hold-up. So doing a valuation based on March data and then rolling it forward to June. So I'm not quite sure that's exactly what your question was.
The question really is about the marina. Whether that'll be incorporated in the evaluation of assets as part of this evaluation of infrastructure assets. At the moment, I think it's just got the insurance value on it.
So through the chair, that's not considered. I mean, the infrastructure assets are our major.
Yeah, I know what they are.
Yeah, so I think that's sort of a side question, but we are getting an evaluation done for 30 June for the marina.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions on the interim audit report? If not, would somebody move that the report be received and we note the status updates to the previous audit recommendations? Thank you, Mr. Murray, seconded by Councillor Dahlberg. Any further discussion on that? If not, all those in favour, please say aye. 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 Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Acklick, for your contribution to that. Draft internal audit report. And welcome Ms. Anderson to the table. Updates, changes before we open it up for questions?
The only thing I'd like to add there is to 4.4, which the amount of the budget for this financial year, I hadn't mentioned that, so I thought I'd just say that that was $40,000, which was the same as last year.
Okay, so open up the internal audit report for questions from Ms. Anderson, noting that consistent with the decision that was made by this group last year, endorsed by Council, that if there is the internal audit component and the business improvement component to the activities of this part of the organisation. So any questions on that? Mr. Murray?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, Ms. Anderson, I'm just having a look at page 31, I believe it is, which is the actual program itself. We've got there a little bit of capacity for 2 audits out of the blue or unspecified, just in case we need those. Do we need to have 2 as capacity, or could we identify another project for 1 and have 1 as capacity, as opposed to having 2 just sort of swinging around? And if we sort of get through the year and we're not utilising the 2, would we go into a mode of identifying 2 projects to do in those slots, so to speak? So I'm just sort of really, I mean, I wouldn't want to get to the end of 2020 and go, oh, we've done 2 internal audit projects. We had capacity to do 2 more, but we actually haven't done anything because nothing's arisen, sort of thing.
Through the chair, I think that we could do any of those suggestions. It would be prudent to wait till nearer the end of the year before we make that decision, because the purpose of having an ad hoc space is in case something comes up that's urgent and we have a limited budget. I suspect that, you know, if we do get to near the end of the year, that there'll be a number of issues that come up or may come up out of the formal risk assessment. And we would be able to work in those areas in particular. So they focus on fraud to a large extent. So, yeah.
Okay. So would you be able to suggest because you said the end of the year, I don't know if you meant December 19 or whether you meant June 2020 in terms of the end of the year. So are you able to suggest a timetable to review or come back to when we might review the unknowns to say, yes, we're going to do a project in this area? Would that be by December 19 to do that, or is that March 2020 before the end of the year? How would we handle that?
Through the chair, well, it does take quite a while to organise an external contractor should we need one. So I would suggest that maybe we look at that very early in the new calendar year.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. It'd be, if we can ensure that that is contained in the minutes in some way, just so that we have a record of that as a commitment. And I've no doubt, Lynn, that you'll keep that in mind anyway for your work program. Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Anderson, I'm wondering, was any eye cast over the procedures that were involved with the Bay Dreams event that was held in Nelson, and the dealings, the costings of council time and staff time, management time, and the cash procedures that were used? Was that at all looked at during the event earlier this year?
Through the chair, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Was there issues around that you would have expected to be an internal audit matter as opposed to perhaps just some assurance from within?
Mr. Chairman, it was an item that was on the confidential agenda for council last week, so perhaps I'll leave it until the confidential part of the meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions on the internal audit report moving for the plan going forward? Internal audit plan. Councillor Maries.
No questions, I just wanted to say I like where this is, the areas of focus. I think they're really appropriate, and just want to acknowledge the difference between the audits and the business improvement work that's proposed. So in terms of the business improvements, it's absolutely clear that this is an indication of a council that is focusing on its key priority, which is lifting council performance. And I just want to say I think this is it's great. This is transparent, it's clear, it's indicating where we need to take steps moving forward, and really looking around some of the risks that may exist. So really pleased to see that going on, and just thank you for the way that's being presented in a really transparent way, so people can see that there is the elected members can see the progress.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Any other questions on the internal audit plan? If not, would somebody move that we receive the drafted internal audit plan and a recommendation to that council approves that internal audit plan? Thank you, Councillor Barker. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dahlberg, thank you. Are there any further questions or discussions on that? If not, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. That concludes the public side of the meeting. Would someone...
I wanted to raise in item number 9. I think we're being very kind in relation to part 2 of item 9, in having this in public excluded for the reason of protecting the privacy of natural persons. I think myself, there are other reasons why we have it in confidential section, and that's to protect our procedures and so forth. But I don't have a great deal of sympathy for people who owe the ratepayers of Nelson a lot of money, and protecting their privacy is not my priority. But
thank you, Councillor Barker. Is that just a comment you wanted to make, or are you suggesting a change to this?
I think in the future we should look at a more appropriate reason under Legoima to go into confidential section rather than to protect the privacy of bad debtors.
Thank you. Do you want to comment on that, Ms Harrison, or we just note that as a point? Thank you, Councillor Barker. In which case, would somebody please move that we go into public excluded?
Mr Chair, just before we do go into public excluded, what I'm concerned about today is that I've had councillors raising matters in public that they then are saying they might want to ask some things about in public excluded that are not specified in the agenda. I've heard comments around Bay Dreams from Councillor Barker, and I've heard comments from the Deputy Mayor around the Brook community group, and I just don't want to, if those matters are going to be discussed in public excluded, then we need to note them before we go in. Otherwise, that's not transparent.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Can we just clarify if we are?
Yeah, can I just respond to that? I think if you'd listened very carefully, I wasn't actually talking about the debt. I was talking about the organisations saying to us that they intended to establish themselves. Now, there's a difference between that and talking about the debt. So I was just actually flagging the fact that they had publicly stated that, and we should take note. That's all I did.
Thank you. So do I read from that that there will not be a further discussion on that matter in public excluded?
No.
So picking up then on the Mayor's point, should that now be added to the items to be discussed in there, I think is what you were seeking to make sure that...
I was, if there was going to be some discussion, because that does go to legal proceedings around position on cost recovery is very much a legal proceedings matter that can only be discussed in public excluded. So if it's not going to be brought up, then it'll stay with our legal team to work their way through that process, which is where it needs to be. If a governance members wish to give direction to the legal team, then that has to be done in public excluded. And
I'm just trying to get some clarification.
Not in a public meeting.
I think we all agree where is public and where isn't on what we're talking about. I think the issue now is whether we need to have that as an item on the subject matter to be considered in public excluded. At the moment we have we have two items on there, which is the minutes and the bad debt write-off. Does anybody want to add an item in there for clarity, for transparency, if indeed we feel that is a need to do so before we go into public excluded?
Chair, I think it would be useful if we could have an item that is called update on legal proceedings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes, I do. So
if we include as item 3 update on legal proceedings with Councillor Matheson.
Sorry, thank you for this. It can be raised, if you wish, under the minutes of the last meeting because it's actually in there. I don't intend to raise it anymore. I'm just simply saying I wanted people to note what utterances have been made by that particular organisation. So if anyone wants to carry on talking about it, you can raise it from the minutes of the last meeting, which is in front of us.
Thank you, Councillor Matheson. I think for the sake of clarity, I will suggest that we add a third item to that document, which is update on legal proceedings. That gives us the option then of how we pursue that.
So we'll just need to adjourn for a couple of minutes to get the procedural resolution.
Okay, so we'll adjourn for a few minutes. And therefore, as we go into, we consider the motion to move into public excluded, we look at this here, that the Audit, Risk and Finance Subcommittee considers the item regarding public excluded update on legal proceedings as a minor item not on the agenda pursuant to the appropriate act. So are people happy with that? Somebody moved, I will move that be accepted?
I'd be happy to second it. Chairman, I'm just wondering whether it could be enlarged a little bit to cover other minor procedural matters. Other minor procedural matters relating to the Bay Dreams contract.
I would be reluctant to discuss that, Councillor Barker, because I have no knowledge of what you're talking about under April.
Well, it has to come up at our governance level at some stage, so maybe it'll come up on the agenda next time. But
okay, we'll just.
I think we need to have a procedure that we can.
Sorry, can we discuss that if we go into that matter rather than discussing it now? We haven't resolved whether we're going to discuss it, so but can we just concentrate on whether we are going to add that to this motion?
I'm happy to second it as it is. I won't push the other part.
Thank you. So you've seconded that, so all those in favour please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Therefore, with that addition, would somebody please move that we go into public excluded? Thank you, Madam Mayor. A seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Barker. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Sorry, I just didn't want to get it